Jason Dettbarn, welcome to the show. How are you?
Kevin, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We were just, I guess, trading some channel war stories, just about the days of old, and I guess the days of new. What's going on here these days? But you're down in sunny Miami, or just I guess that's a little west of Miami, Coral Gables. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
People don't care about
Yeah.
my background now, but when the wintertime comes, I get mocked a lot when they're in the
Oh,
cold weather.
I
Palm
bet.
trees in the
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
When it's 35 and overcast and drizzly here in the Mid Atlantic, everyone wants to flock down your way, all the snowbirds. But so well
Exactly.
played, well played. Well, again, welcome. I'm really looking forward to this one particularly because of your background, and we'll get into that obviously. And then in one of the other main reasons is really your core focus, in this industry is on, arguably the most valuable company in the world, in Apple. And love to just kind of understand kind of your Addigy and its approach to the market and what have you. But before we get into that, let's take it way back. Are you a native Floridian, or where's
I
early
was.
home for you?
I grew up in Miami. Went to grad school out in Boston, and then out in San Francisco working for a while too. But this was home, and came home just a little, a couple of years before I started Addigy anyway. So yeah, this is home.
Awesome. So I guess compare and contrast Miami to Boston in the winter.
Man, I landed in a nor'easter, get off the T and walking through Harvard Square with a suitcase in a nor'easter. It was a wake-up experience. I never used to look at the weather either. So I'd wake up in the morning because in here, I'm wearing shorts and that's just the daily weather. But I leave at 65 degrees, wear what I was going to wear, didn't ever look at the weather, and then come home and sleet and snow. And so, yeah, I grew up a little bit in Boston.
Yeah. Around about what years were you up in Boston?
I was there in 2001. So I was there during 9/11. Weird scenario. I went to MIT in Cambridge. And so I remember vividly that the president talking to all of us outside the school after 9/11. It was a surreal period there. If I think back quite a few years ago now, but it was a fun time. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I spent some time up there, and actually, I think some of the best parties we went to were over at MIT. Surprisingly, people don't think of MIT as a party school, but yeah, I can definitely vouch for the fact that they know what they're doing up there. So.
Yeah, I went to a few parties at Harvard too, and they would have like beer funnels going down third story down to the first story. Like, yeah, it was interesting times.
I may or may not be able to relate to that, but I was up there in the late 90s, or maybe a couple of years before that, but yeah, it was definitely a good stop. But so you kind of you're up in Boston. What was the impetus to go out to the West Coast? Was that kind of early tech, or what took you all the way across the country?
So I came out of school. These are old war stories in a way, and nobody remembers a phone without a GPS device in it. But I worked at Motorola out of school, and I was the lead engineer on the first GPS-enabled phone we ever had in the world, Java-enabled, other things like that. So it was a fun time at Motorola, and so I did embedded software engineering out of school, and I worked at a spinoff marine company called Raymarine and others like that. And eventually I just had a real passion for business. I had a small backup company in the day with my best friends, built a great product, but we realized, okay, engineers think that they can just move Earth, right? They can build product, but these things don't sell themselves. Mm-hmm. So we stood around trying to figure out who's going to sell this stuff. And that's when I realized I had a problem that, we have to have that in our DNA. So I was get an MBA in the field, academic at heart. It was not a bad idea in a way, and no pun on that one, or get my MBA in the field. So I went from literally coding in a cubicle to joining CA in enterprise software sales. Wow. And my whole family was like, Jason's not a sales guy. He's going to fail. This is terrible. So I moved out of San Francisco for CA, did channel work there for a while, and was watching what was happening in the market. It was 2007. And so this was when MSPs were actually starting to change their business models from break fix to managed services. The cowboy days of things, right? And I saw what was changing in the market, and I reached out and joined Kaseya in 2007. So it was an amazing time. Like we were just growing gangbusters, and learned a lot along the way. Had some great mentors there at that period of time. So I got my MBA in the field, and made a lot of money doing so as well too, which was cool.
So was that intentional or by design, right? Going out the West Coast, and at that point, did you feel like you needed to get kind of the business, the sales, kind of the marketing end of technology? You knew kind of the bits and bytes, and
Yeah.
you plow your way through, in building product from an engineering standpoint, but it was like, all right, now I got to go out and really understand, product market fit and the whole sales process in general. But that was by design.
It was absolutely by design. My girlfriend at the time came out there with me, and we figured it out. And I had a really good sales leader that really broke down everything in a mechanical engineering way, almost to me. So I went in there, and my first quarter on the job at Kaseya, I put the largest number in history that they ever had on the board. So it's kind of cool. I was like, okay, I think I can do this. This is nice. And I mean, literally what happened was I managed New York City in the Northeast, in the West Coast, which was weird. It was kind of how they were doing some shifts around there. I was like, yes, I'll do it. I'll get up before in the morning. I was in the office before 5. And part of it was just pure sweat equity labor. I wouldn't leave till like 5 or 6. So I was putting in ridiculous hours. I had to get smarter, not just work harder. And that's how I gained my chops. Yeah.
Oh. There's something interesting about the West Coast back to East Coast, getting up at 4 a.m. I've been out there, quite a few times. And I think one of the things I really appreciate, been out for a couple of the Dreamforce events, or whether to visit, partners or clients, but getting up at 4 o'clock, getting to the gym early, and then kind of getting situated at your desk, and you're well ahead of everybody else, or most people on the West Coast. But you're primed, for that East Coast. And I think a lot of people, I don't know, maybe this is kind of separates the week from the chaff, whatever. But a lot, end their day at 2, 3 o'clock. But then, I think the more successfuls, whether by design or necessity, they plow through to 6, 7 o'clock, Pacific. And those are long days. Those are long, grueling days.
It is. And you know what? At the end of the day, what is sales? It's all about the follow-up work. One of my biggest pet peeves when I go to conferences is people that talk a big game there and are really good in front of people itself, but fall short on the follow-up. Everything we do to maintain our name and what we do, it's about the follow-up. I mean, frankly, when I started Addigy, a ton of my customers were all lining up to invest because they believed in me and what I was doing and taking care of them. And that's the kind of stuff that, if you do good follow-up work, if you do your job right, it's not about pitching and grabbing a check. It's maintaining those relationships and doing what's right.
Yeah, and this industry, as you know, is all built on relationships, right? It's incredible. So, kind of sticking with this engineering, crossover into sales theme, did you approach sales from a I imagine you did, from basically an engineering standpoint? There's just like, there's a formula here. I gotta figure it out, and
Yes.
Did that include, hundreds of books? I mean, what was that, getting into sales? Maybe, it's almost like left brain, right brain, but like, how did that transition, work for you?
I mean, it was having some good mentors. That office was honestly a lot of churn of sales reps. And I remember one of the guys who was struggling, one of our top reps, and it's like, what are you doing differently? He's like, there's some good books out there to get on that. He's just a jerk about it. But I think it was just putting forth the reps, right? Like, even when I started Addigy itself, you think about product market fit. I talk about how I literally had one phone in my office. It was myself. I ended up hiring 200 because I bootstrapped the business. And anybody who called me, I wouldn't put them through a phone tree. I didn't block all these things. I wanted to talk to them, whether they're a customer, a prospect, whatever it was. More reps I can do to understand what we need to change. And I would literally just turn around. My engineer would make a couple of changes, and we would keep talking about things. It was that speed of agile capability that we had on those early days. Because, the weird part, book-wise, and I've been on this for a while, and this is a little bit product specific, but every investor out there, everybody focuses on product market fit. And the goal there is to align yourself for the value and what people need. and doing it quickly. But there's no books on product market fit. There's no classes you can take on it. There's a couple books actually by some great leaders in the space, but it's still an untapped area. But what it comes down to is, what do I got to keep doing and iterating to get ourselves there quicker? And so, yeah, people joke around and be like, they would call at it, "Hi, Addigy speaking. How can I help you? Can I speak with sales? Sure. What can I do for you?" And I appreciated that, and that's part of something I'm very proud of. It was like, let's reduce those layers. Let's make sure we understand the core needs that are there and iterate quickly. So
Yeah.
the reps that I had in sales that just kept doing it. I had more at bats, more ability to keep refining the trade.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I was to say, through the last couple of startups, it's, there's that excitement when you, and you're right. It's like, it's not formulaic, right? Product market fit is just, it's constantly evolving. It's all test and measure and iterate and what have you. But you do look back and appreciate those early days. I've talked on this show a couple of times about, the early days of ID Agent, where we started out and we were real focused on enterprise because we spun that technology out of kind of our government arm of our consulting firm. And the first dozen customers were enterprise and really engaging. And it was still enterprise. So it was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of stuffy. But when we transitioned into the MSP space and we were talking about like relationships and just, how fluid, the channel is, it was amazing because like first, 50, maybe like 75 partners. They had my number, they're texting me, "Hey, you guys should make this button up here, bigger, or, it'd be cool to see this kind of data come in." And that allowed us to iterate a lot faster. But as you scale, right, you get to 400, 500, 1,000, 2,000 partners. It's, it's harder to keep that level of engagement. And so you have to rely on, better enablement teams, and better processes. But yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things about entrepreneurship is when you get to those inflection points, and you have people calling you, say, "Hey, can you do this? Can you do that?" I think you've got something there, and that's
Yeah.
thrill. I'm sure you can relate to that.
We had investors that always wanted to try to invest in us, and I didn't want to spend the time. Like I literally, our general counsel was the former GC at Kaseya, and I'd go out and visit him in San Jose, doing business trips and stuff too, because we had like Excel partners and Tenium and other big companies using us. And he's like, "You got to get investors," and I'm like, "Yeah, we're just growing too fast. Like, I don't have time for that. It's a good distraction." So yeah, it was good times. I didn't know how good, how fast we were really moving at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's something special. So you mentioned you're at Kaseya, and then was there something in between Kaseya and Addigy, or?
Yeah, so nothing in between. I basically I was there for a while doing different roles, and at one point I looked at the space because we deal with PCs. They're all different types of machines and setups, and so you're dealing with all sorts of different variables. I was never an Apple fanboy overall. Actually, people, I'm kind of a black sheep in our market because I openly tell people like it's a tool set that we can manage, and I think MSPs need to start understanding this too. Is like, this is just another asset that we can manage really well, and not to get too. It's actually simpler. It's easier, monolithic hardware, software. It's a Unix system, so we can make it do whatever we want. And so I quit my job. I had a second child on the way. I was not in any way independently wealthy, and iterated and bootstrapped the business to initially a couple million in ARR before we took in any investment capital. And it was and I appreciate that patience too, of just staying really close to doing that and letting ourselves get to terminal velocity to really start moving the needle from there.
Yeah. So what were those early days like? You said you had a second child on the way. You've got this. There's a market here. There's an opportunity here. What were those? What do you remember most about the early days?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I frankly, if I had my particular job aspect of things where I'm commuting an hour to work and then leaving at like 6 or 7, those early days I wouldn't see my kids. So I was able to work my butt off. You drop them off at school, go home at 5, help my wife for a couple of hours, go back to work till like 9, right? And just crank out a lot of work, which I love doing, and yet spending real quality time. So I felt like I had the right mix, and it was we were set up in a little back of a strip mall for like $300 a month. My team was scrappy. They loved it. They had a ton of fun. We had an open tab at a little Cuban cafeteria right next to us. They get Cuban coffee all day long. We were absolutely over caffeinated, and we just had a ball. And the thing was, back in that pace, people, I'm very much opposed to adding the chrome to things, like making something look bigger, shinier, better than it needs to be. I wanted the aspect where some people were interviewing come in and go, look, this office is really crappy. Good. If you don't see the vision and passion of what we got to do, you're probably not the right fit here. So I really owned that. And that was with everything else we did, right? Even our customers to some extent, right? We just were authentic, clear, add value. And we would close massive deals with companies, and they'd be like, how many employees are you? I don't know. Soon we'll hopefully be at 9. We only had 4 people in the room. And so it was great stuff. Like, we always try to make ourselves look bigger. Even as I could say it, even at CA, we were never big enough. We were never perfect enough. Nobody is solid enough. You just got to keep putting yourself out there and getting better at what you do day after day.
That's the hallmark of a true entrepreneur. When somebody asks how big you are and you're 4 people, you say just under 10. And when you get to 35, just under 50, so yeah. No, I could definitely.
Now we're literally over 100, so it's a little different than back then. But even when I would call MSPs, and I'd be asking, unfortunately, they hate this. Everybody hates these questions. But where do you see the business in a year or two? They would always moniker themselves off headcount. I never fully understood that, right?
Yeah.
And we want to have a well-paid small team of great people, and drive growth and profitability. That's the name of the game. And having more people does not mean that we're adding more general value to everybody.
Right.
So
yeah, no, very, very cool. That back of the strip mall and access to Cuban coffee, I think sounds like that's the winning formula. So you've entered this marketplace. You're doing it at arguably at one of the biggest inflection points in Apple's and explosion of Apple devices and peripherals and just, it's like, I don't know that I should have looked up the market share for Apple devices versus, PC. Certainly in the phone market, it's massive, but you do have a extraordinarily large TAM, right? And I think it's often one of these things where MSPs, maybe even going back, it might be projecting a little bit, but going back 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it was almost like the Apple devices like over here, right? I don't know if it was because everyone was just the PC market was too healthy, and they don't know if they look at a distraction, but now you're at a point where it's ubiquitous, right? It's massive. Your TAM is massive, but so where's the thought process of the core focus on Apple devices versus everything else?
There just seemed, you walk around the airport, right? Everybody was having Apple devices. It was relatively clear to me, but I was really shocked by how the market didn't really see this. We only had a small vendor at the time called Jamf in the space, really nothing else. And the question I got most often back in the day, this was 8.5 years ago, was how many Apple devices really are there in business? Because they treated them as BYOD. And I think even the term with security, BYOD can't exist anymore. It's not, you can have a BYOD device, but it has to meet all the compliancy requirements for the company if you're going to use it for business purposes. So these sideline devices can't be BYOD anymore. They were continuing to make solid strides bottom up into environments and workplaces. And I felt a lot of, I felt compelled that this was a big enough market and it was going to continue to grow. And I think this holds true. Our MSPs grow at a pretty massive rate. So one of the best monikers I have, we're about 60, a little over 60% MSPs. The rest of it is, large internal IT, universities, churches, et cetera. But those MSPs, they grow year over year at a massive pace with us. I think they just find that, like, some of our MSPs don't even want to do webinars with us because they feel like they've cracked the code a bit and they don't want to share all the formula. But there's just a lot of good growth out there because very few MSPs can, actually do some of the basic things out of the box with Apple, which is just mainly tools oriented. It's not this is not like managing another behemoth RMM. It's really
Right.
pretty simple stuff. But they're also critical retention devices. These are usually the check writers who use the device that are using Apple within the organization, if they're not all Apple. There's solid IP on these things too, more than other devices. In my earliest days, it was like year 2, we had the guy who managed the chairman and CEO of Citibank's devices, and they're all 100% PC. But here is a chairman that walks in the boardroom with an Apple device, and you're like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That I've got that level of inflection point inside of a company, but they're 100% PC and they're just ignoring those Apple devices.
Yeah.
So.
How much of that do you think is, I don't know if you call it the pitfall or kind of the false start of MDM in particular, right?
It's a really good point. Really good question. I mean, the Apple forced MDM on Macs themselves. You had done it through agents. That's why people are used to tools that could do some Mac on agent. But once you have MDM, which is your only choice, you got to make the right choice with MDM. You can only have one on the device. Then that becomes your source of all authentication. Like root back in the day, I could do anything onto a Mac I wanted to. Now MDM is that first point of it. So if I want to deploy security software, anything I want to do on the device, your MDM has to be solid enough to do the orchestration of all that work for you. And that it takes a long time for the overall market, even in our tech space, to really adopt that and understand that, because Apple moves freakishly fast. For example, like they've changed it so we're using an entirely new infrastructure. MDM was built back in 2005, and it hasn't been iterated on. They've built on it, but it's a new infrastructure called declarative device management. It's completely separate from MDM, and they're moving all to that. So there's a point in time, we don't know exactly when. I'm not trying to be provocative, but they're stopping their work in MDM, and they're going to end of life that. So all these vendors are going to have to move to a new infrastructure.
Yeah.
So Apple decides this is where the hockey puck is going. We're going to go straight there, and there's going to be some fallout. There's going to be issues, but we're going to get there faster than anybody else in the market. And that's just the way they work. So over the next year, we're going to see vendors are going to have to make that shift, and a lot of them are going to fall by the wayside when it comes to MDM.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I remember back in the days we had great companies like Mokana, and I'm trying to think some of the other ones. Mokana was a West-based or San Francisco-based MDM. I think we did a lot of work with the government with their applications, but there was like this spike of MDM, and it's like just the Apple adoption just it was stagnant, right? And it took several years, before, people started to really understand that to catch up to it. And at that point, as you know, right? I mean, the TAM, the number of devices that were out there were, explosions and understatement. It was predominantly in the mobile arena. And now if you look, and I'm preaching to the choir again, but if you look at, just the fact that the firewall's gone, right?
Yes.
Maybe pre-COVID, yeah, there was that sense of inside the walls and outside the walls, but there are no more walls, right? And then you've got that explosion of apps, in the app markets, and I don't know. You look at it, it's just there's so many potential different directions, that a platform could go in trying to secure, manage, and optimize these devices, and so. And maybe we'll get into kind of the forward-looking stuff here in a moment. But I guess if there's like a snapshot or a couple lines, like how do you describe Addigy in a couple sentences and kind of the impact on the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at our platform, we're kind of a combination RMM and MDM, and you need both of those because the MDM does a very subset of things, and RMM can't do its job without that orchestration of MDM. So we have this live management capability, all these under the hood capabilities that you want to be able to do, even locking, wiping, and in mass patching, software deployment, all those things that you really need. But where this market is going to is really pretty exciting. Apple is definitely investing a tremendous amount in security. And so these devices are getting more and more secure, but that's with your tool set that you're using to be able to, make sure you're patching and make sure you're doing the things that are necessary to get there. But they're finally investing in user authentication platform, SSO is what we call it. And so this now allows you pull it out of the plastic shrink wrap, and with Addigy right now, you can log in without anybody touching it right out of the plastic when you buy it from Apple with your company account to your login page with Microsoft, Azure, or Google Okta. But that's the world we've always lived in. It starts with the user. It doesn't matter if they're from a Windows device or an Apple device. They should be able to authenticate with their creds, have the right things installed in their machines, have the right rights and privileges. And so this is where Apple's really going with this, and essentially getting rid of passwords with pass keys so that they're all working across apps in your browser. They understand where these things are going, and there's going to be a little bit of bumps and bruises along the way, but they're fighting to get there, and working within the Microsoft ecosystem. There's consolidation happening in that realm of users first, which is going to be more secure, and not the world we live in overall MSP, which is just managing the device. The managed device is definitely a legacy thing and way to do things. It's a proxy. We have to, through the users, manage their device, but we have to manage our users. We got to make them happy and productive. We got to make them fully secure anywhere they go, and that's the the correlation coming together.
How engaged or involved or receptive is Apple, with you guys? I imagine because you guys, you potentially have such an impact on, their users, and you guys, you probably can predict where a lot of the market should go based on maybe, again, projecting, but maybe telemetry and kind of stuff that you might see. But how engaged are you guys with Apple in talking through roadmap and understanding their roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, we were in headquarters a couple of weeks ago. That we're really not supposed to say our level of communication and comms, but they have specific terms on all those things, especially around our NDAs. But the fact is that they are quite receptive to things, opposed to what people might think, because they are just a product focused machine, and they don't have the time to work with a lot of different accounts, but they know that this is where the market's going in a year. They're not going to give all of us vendors lots of time and effort, and we're going to end of life this in 4 years. No, they're going straight there, and they want to be the top players in that space in 2 years, and they don't care how they got to get there to make a better experience inevitably. And when you're an entrepreneur, actually, you sit back and you think, is it better that way than doing this slow rolled, low pain type of thing? Or is it better to just try to get there as quickly as possible too? And that's your myopic goal. You gotta hand it to them being one of the largest companies in the world and still kind of operates with that level of, I don't know what the word is, just pure focus.
Yeah. Well, imagine it does. I mean, to your point, imagine it does. It might be challenging, but it does keep you. I mean, you always have to be on your toes, right? Because you're in some ways subject to what the mothership decides they want to do, right? And there's only going to they're only going to forecast or telegraph so much of what they're going to do, and so I guess from always having to be on and ready to go.
But you can see a lot of that stuff. They literally do a developer conference they do every year. They'll shed light on where they'll be in 3 years, and they do not deviate. I don't remember anything where they went down a path, maybe their keyboard, right? If anything, no, but in the developer community, they go, this is where we're going, and they just keep moving. And it may take them 3 years until it's required and absolutely required, but they're gonna keep driving that direction. And I think just for MSPs in general, we have to make sure that we provide that level of experience, because the tools are getting better. The experience is getting better. And if we were burned by how hard it was to manage Apple previously, it's not the case today. And there are ways with it. They're, getting stuff better, a few things changing, but this is a space we can't ignore anymore. Too many MSPs, I think, still ignore it, where they just don't manage the device. And even on the cybersecurity side of it, cyber insurance requires it to be managed and have an MDM on there. And we've just got to do our diligence with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Addigy is in the channel. I mean, it's ubiquitous, is right? As you think of Apple, you think of Addigy in the channel. You know, where else can you go in the channel? I mean, you guys are the name. You hear the champs and something like that. You know, secondary, tertiary kind of players out there, but you guys have the name and I think the brand recognition. I mean, how do you grow beyond that? Like, what's next for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's still a large platform for us on Apple itself. I think people beg us all the time to try to do Windows or Android or anything like that, but because of the level of innovation that keeps driving from Apple, we shield our customers from a lot of those changes. They don't have to feel or know what's actually changing under the hood. We're just delivering those and once this is mature and stable enough, then we swap that in and it's working for them. So it keeps us really busy. It's now the integration into all the other capabilities. So my security, my compliance through Splunk, through Vanta, through everything else. That's the stuff that we have to keep fully integrating into the ecosystem. We have a very tight integration with Microsoft and our partnership with them with conditional access in Intune and Azure AD. So that's where the market's moving. Like Microsoft is a juggernaut in where it's moving towards for the IT space. And we need to make sure that everything fully incorporates and integrates there. And again, all those old MDM tools from Meraki to Mobile Iron to AirWatch, the list goes on and on. They're not going to be able to keep up with these changes. So that's really our mantra, is that let's maintain that Apple leadership. Let's make sure that it's really clear that when you choose one MDM, you're going to choose the best MDM period to be able to do everything you need and stay highly focused on that.
Yeah, thank you. You reminded me of one of the ones that was AirWatch way back in the day, and it was a painful experience. Maybe I shouldn't say that publicly, but there was these were government programs, so
everything was painful. Yeah. It's a big behemoth.
Yeah, man, my goodness. Look, I mean, I don't know what else I could say, because you guys, again, the name recognition, the brand recognition, what you guys have done. Kind of the loyalty and the focus, I think, is all hallmarks of creating an excellent business. And it sounds like you guys have the right formula and have done right by the customers and are starting to really kick it up a level. What's the best way to reach out to you or Addigy? Obviously, people can go up on our stack charts and see you guys as an industry leader. But what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, come to Addigy.com. We got a lot of resources there too. Migration guides to help you migrate people off their site, different tools for patching and KB articles. So definitely a lot of resources, whether you use this or not, on Addigy.com. And sales at Addigy, if you want to talk to us, see a demo, see what it can do for you guys. We'd love to work with our more partners.
Awesome. Well, Jason, I appreciate the time and said it's been great watching Addigy, really start to kick it in and start to scale. And so I'm a big fan of all the success you guys have generated. And sounds like it's pretty formulaic at this point. And for you, it's kicking in that engineering, mindset and leading it to scale. So well done to you.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Well, it's the one thing is, I'll leave it here, is that we're a snapshot right now of our people, and what our people are is what the product and the evolution of our platform is going to be in a couple of years, right? So it's the thing that makes me get up in every day is the quality of people in our organization that love what we do, that have, frankly, sometimes more passion than I do, right? And you feed off that, and it's an amazing thing. That then moves down to our customers who get that level of experience and passion. And I just got to make sure I don't screw that up.
I know that one well. I can certainly relate to that. So, well, great, Jason. I appreciate it. And so we'll direct everybody in the show notes, and this will be up on all the major platforms, including Spotify. So check that out. And it's great having you. And I guess we'll see you at an upcoming event here. I think every event the next couple of months is back down in the state of Florida. So I'm sure I'll run into you at some point. So
Miami's a place to be, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
All right, bud. I appreciate it. Thanks.